Here's how it works normally in Denver. When there's an election, like the one in Colorado next month, the county clerk's office mails you a ballot. Get your ballot in the mail, you fill it out, then you either mail it back in or you drop it off in person. But to get your ballot in the first place, it comes in the mail. That is normally how it works in Denver in a mail ballot election. This year, not normal. This year in Denver, voting comes with a catch. This year, Colorado Secretary of State Scott Gessler wants to make it harder to vote. Mr. Gessler is a Republican. He was elected last year, and he's decided that this year he would like to stop Colorado clerks from sending ballots to everyone who used to get one. As Secretary of State, Mr. Gessler has pushed a number of measures designed to make it harder to vote or to register to vote. In Colorado's last legislative session, for example, he pushed for a requirement that you would have to show a birth certificate or a passport in order to register to vote. Because, don't you always have your birth certificate on you when the nice League of Women Voters lady outside the supermarket asks if you'd like to register? Don't you keep that in your pocket or your glove box? That Scott Gessler try failed, but he is not giving up on trying to make it harder to vote in Colorado. Last week, he wrote to the clerk in Pueblo County, which so happens to be a heavily Democratic county. He wrote to the clerk and ordered him not to send out ballots to troops overseas who missed the big 2010 election and have not voted since. He wants them to be considered inactive. Quote, as my office has previously explained, you do not have the authority to mail ballots to such voters. The clerk of Pueblo County says he believes the law requires him to send ballots to overseas troops in order to help them vote. The clerk told the Colorado Independent, quote, you can just imagine the troops have bigger things on their minds. When they have the ballot in their hand, they'll vote. But the Pueblo County clerk also says he will comply with this order from the Secretary of State. Overseas troops from Pueblo County who haven't voted just lately, who've been kind of busy fighting on our nation's behalf and didn't have a chance to respond to the postcard reminders. Thanks to your state's Republican Secretary of State, there will be no ballots sent to you to vote in this next election. The Secretary of State raised the same objection in Denver County, but he did it after Denver had already sent out their ballots to troops overseas. In Denver's case, Gessler actually ordered the county not to send ballots to 1 in 5 Denver voters. 1 in 5 Denver voters who would usually get a ballot. 1 in 5 considered inactive because they had not gone to the polls since last year. Instead of a ballot, they are supposed to get a reminder. Quote, send an additional postcard to inactive voters. Such an approach will be more economical than sending mail ballots to all inactive voters. Just for kicks, let's look at the map of these inactive voters in Denver, who the Republican Secretary of State now says shouldn't get ballots mailed to them so they can't participate in the next election. Okay, here's where the inactive voters live. The redder the precinct, the more people who have skipped voting since last year, okay? Now here's another map. This one shows Denver by race and ethnicity. The white folks are in green. See the orangey strips? Those are the Hispanic neighborhoods. So here are Denver's so-called inactive voters, the ones the Secretary of State says shouldn't get a ballot sent to them this time. And here are Denver's Hispanic neighborhoods. Denver Clerk Deborah Johnson looked at the maps and she looked at the law and she decided to tell the Secretary of State she was sending out the ballots, regardless of what he said. Quote, this is a fundamental issue of fairness and of keeping voting accessible to as many eligible voters as possible. That's what the Denver clerk told the Secretary of State right before the Secretary of State sued that clerk, Deborah Johnson, sued her to make voting in his state harder to do.